The Growing Destinations podcast is brought to you by Experience Rochester. Learn more about Minnesota's third largest city, which is home to Mayo Clinic and features wonderful recreational and entertainment opportunities by visiting experiencerochestermn.com.
All of a sudden, we lost a major contribution to feeding the animals. So I decided that, we partake in other agritourism events and we have the time now to put something together. And I do sell my yarn at very different, yarn and fiber sales. And this is such a beautiful environment. We're adjacent to the Sogan Valley. And why not? Let's just try this.
I've always enjoyed letting people understand agriculture. As we get farther away from agriculture, it's harder to relate to it. So when we can have events and things like that and, have even adults come out and see what we do, how it works, is very rewarding.
Welcome to the Growing Destinations podcast, where we take a deep dive into destination development and focus on a wide range of topics, from tourism and entertainment to economic development and entrepreneurism and much more. I'm your host, Bill Von Bank. The COVID-19 pandemic upended the zoology careers of Diana and Dean Treangen. The husband and wife team leaned in on their animal background and training to start something new. On their 45-acre farm in Dennison, Minnesota, they raise a rare breed of sheep and utilize the wool to support an emerging agritourism business. Their farm has become a classroom for young and old. An annual Harvest Fiber Festival attracts vendors from throughout the upper Midwest. Next up for the Treangens is to engage with tour groups and homeschoolers and provide them greater opportunities to connect with nature. We're on location at Harvest Hill Acres in Dennison, Minnesota, located between Rochester and Minneapolis-St. Paul. I'm joined by Diana and Dean Treangen, owners of this wonderful farm. Diana and Dean, welcome to the Growing Destinations podcast.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Tell us about Harvest Hill Acres. Dean?
We have approximately 45 acres here. We have about 15 acres that are tillable. We have around 90 sheep at the present time. We have 2 llamas that we use for guard llamas.
Guard llamas, what does that mean?
They help with predators, mainly coyotes. So knock on wood, we haven't had any problems, so we are assuming they work.
So llamas, they actually are protectors.
Right. They do a pretty good job, and it's kind of funny if you watch them, why the sheep will gather around them when they seem to need to.
In the llama aura, why they are good guard animals is they actually make different vocalizations, and the vocalizations are what we call an alarm call. And you can hear it from a pretty far distance. So there are times, and the llamas are getting used to what new sheep, things like that, and sometimes they just make the alarm call. And at times we're outside and we go running to see if there really is a problem, and sometimes that's more comical than others. There's heavy breathing as we're running up and down the driveway. And then we get to the field that they're in and we look around, and she's doing an alarm call because the neighbor's dairy cows are out in the adjoining pasture. And for some reason, even though she sees them every day, all of a sudden that's not right, because maybe their weather's bad, they're not out, but it's new in their aura. And so she makes the alarm call, the sheep come over, and it's really nothing. But there have been times where everybody makes fun of me, especially my husband across the table. The coyotes
his eyes are big right now.
The coyotes do make a very distinctive noise, especially when they're communicating. And it wakes me up at night, probably because my brain is programmed for that. And I go outside. Doesn't matter if it's winter, summer. I go outside and check, because if I hear the llamas calling, then I know it's probably a problem. And if not, it's just the coyotes that are just communicating across the fields. And, we have valleys and peaks around here, lots of trees, a lot of grass fields. So the sound, especially at night, just carries. So it's kind of even though we have an electric fence to protect our sheep, we use the llamas as just a secondary protection. And it is kind of a very big investment. So we do want to protect our animals.
Who knew, but so interesting. How long have you lived here, Dean?
We've been here a little bit over 5 years now. So we had a few sheep before we moved here, and we decided that we needed more space to expand the business. So we started looking for a place to move to.
It's a beautiful place. You breed one of the rarest breeds of sheep in the U.S. Tell us about the breed and what's special about it.
Well, it's called CVM Romedales. They are one of the few breeds that were actually created in the United States. So it is a U.S. breed. It's also a rare breed. Currently, there's probably only 3 or 4 people in Minnesota that have them. It is a nationwide. There are we just came back from a trip of bringing a couple animals to people in Ohio and Kentucky. It is known for its mothering ability and its really wonderful fiber. They are what is called a dual purpose sheep. So you can use them for fiber or you can use them for meat, which we haven't done yet, but it's always in the back of our minds with our numbers that that's a possibility. And with all the, farm to kitchen, farm to table movements, we are exactly primed for that, for providing meat for that type of dinner or restaurant or things like that. So they really only were started in the 1940s. They're a good size. Why I picked them was because of my background in biology and conservation, being a minor breed, but also they're not a big sheep. They're not little. They're not little guys. They're mid-size. And so on days I can do most things with them on my own, especially when it comes to lambing and things like that. And if I get stuck, I wake Dean up and he comes out and helps me. But it's a good size breed for what we want them for.
Dean, how many sheep do you have on property?
We have approximately 90 right now.
90?
Yes.
Wow. Do you breed every year, and then do you then sell some off, or how does that work?
Yes. Typically, we breed the yearlings from last year, or the first ones we'll breed, and then we'll pick out some that either the fiber is particularly good from that sheep or whatever, and then we'll breed them.
I've heard you mention fiber a lot, so I need you to define fiber for us as it relates to sheep, because we're not talking about bran flakes or food.
No.
We're talking about something else.
Yes, we are. So they're sheep, so they produce wool. Wool is a fiber. Llamas also produce a fiber. It's not called wool, it's called fiber. Pretty much everything here, except the cats and the dogs and the chickens, are contributing to our wool fiber business that we have here at our farm. We do have an Angora rabbit. We even use her. It takes us all year to save up the fiber from her to use that. I also will use fiber from other neighboring farms, alpaca, Angora goats. And each year I try to create something different, like Dean mentioned. When we're doing breeding, I might look at breeding more of white sheep. This sheep does, one of the things I forgot to mention was this sheep, when it's born, you don't know what color it's going to be. They carry all different colors. They carry browns and a light beige, which is called morit. We can have white ones. We can have dark brown ones. So that kind of also reflects in how I breed, thinking, well, I really need some more white yarn, so I need more white sheep. So I kind of play with that as well. And also with the biology background, I also look at the genetics and the mean kinship and all the stuff that we did in our previous life to make sure that not only am I protecting the animals that we have in our care, but also the breed across the country, things like that.
Dean, tell us about the process of getting the fiber from the sheep.
It can be a long process.
Okay, well,
maybe
we
I
only
should do
have
that.
about 10 minutes.
Maybe I should do that one. He's the manual labor on a day like that.
Okay, well, let's
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the process, because we are in your retail shop,
Yes,
connected to the sheep barn, and I'm staring right behind you at all of this yarn. Am I saying that right?
Yes,
I'm
you
learning
are.
a lot about fiber right now. Obviously, you've got a really cool business operation going on here, but how do you get into this operation? So talk us through it quickly.
So once a year, this breed of sheep gets sheared by a person that is very well trained in that. And they come in, it's like a haircut for sheep. And they do it once a year. Each sheep provides anywhere from 8 to 15 pounds of wool. That then is the next step is I go through it and pull all the nastiness off of it. And then I have a couple different mills I work with, and it goes to the mill. They wash it, they go through a process, and they make a couple different projects. I use 2 mills for yarn and roving, which is the step before yarn for you, Bill.
Okay.
But I also use other mills for other things. So like I use a mill that makes wool blankets, and I use a different mill for felting, which is kind of like your hot pads and if you need some wool liners for your boots. So all of these are natural fibers. I don't dye anything. So the product color you see is the color of the sheep. So I do that just because that's how I set up my business and how I wanted to do it. So everything, there are some other things. We do some reuse, recycle type products, our tote bags, things like that. So the barn had a shop attached to it by the previous owner. And I pretty much just came in and took over, and it's a workshop. It's a meeting place. We use it for different events and meals and all sorts of things.
In terms of the environment, Dean, for having this many sheep, what really needs to happen to make sure that you have the right environment and that you can be productive and have progress with the business that you've started?
Well, of course, sheep are quite adaptable. They don't need a lot of shelter. They do need some shelter, but they're very good at laying outside when it's 0 and being very comfortable doing that. So we have shelters in the pastures that we have. We do have about 15 acres of hay that we make each year to help feed them. And we would like to get into some rotational grazing where we move pastures for the sheep after they have grazed for a period of time, and then move them to a new one and keep rotating them so that is able to keep growing.
In 2021, you created a Harvest Fiber Festival at your farm. That sounds like a big undertaking. Give us the backstory of this festival.
Well, in 2020, like most people, we lost our management jobs at a zoo that we worked at. Dean was given the option to retire, and I was on a layoff callback situation. And for our daily life, Dean pretty much takes care of us, and my job took care of little things, cars, and the animals. So all of a sudden, we lost a major contribution to feeding the animals. So I decided that, we partake in other agritourism events, and we have the time now to put something together. And I do sell my yarn at very different, yarn and fiber sales. And this is such a beautiful environment. We're adjacent to the Sogan Valley. And why not? Let's just try this using some of my marketing and other experiences from other places, plus our animal background, and also different things working with Minnesota Department of Ag and just creating something that would be a little bit different for the area. So we put this festival together, and it is for fiber. I have somewhere between 20 and 25 vendors that come, all my fiber friends and farms in the area, plus from Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and also, but a big part of me also wanted this to be a local activity for the area. This is a very neighbor-friendly, even though our neighbors are 2 miles away. The community of Cannon Falls and Northfield and even Wanamingo is very important to us just as businesses and friends. And so I wanted to make sure we had like a kid component, and everything that we did was local. So I use local food trucks. I have events and things for the kids. I have a face painter. We have crafts. So it's not only for people that are very involved in fiber as a hobby, but also for the local community and children to get outside and see. When you think of farms, most people think of the cows, but this is sheep, and we do different things with our sheep, and we let the kids feed them and pet them, the ones that'll come over. And the llamas are very popular. So just as a way, because that's kind of our background with educating about animals and wildlife, to throw some of that into the festival as well. So we've now been doing it 2 years. We just finished our second one. And I think it's embraced by local community as well as what we call the fiberistas.
Dean, as you look at the last 2 years of doing this festival, and it's I'm guessing going to be heading into year 3 next year. Any insights or takeaways from what you've learned from the first 2 years of creating a public festival at a farm?
Of course, when you try to do something on a farm, it's also a working farm. So you're dealing with the working aspect as well as all of a sudden you have people everywhere and parking everywhere. Big thing. So I think that's some of the things you have to work through, and it's kind of a learning process each year. Hopefully you get better each year and try to figure that out.
How about any issues with Department of Agriculture or other agencies related to having people at a farm with animals?
It's huge right now. We do follow Safe Practices, which is a program from the Department of Ag. Minnesota Grown actually even came out here to participate in some of the activities. We do have hand washing stations for anybody that would have contact with the animals. I think because of our previous background with safety and animals and things like that, I think that really kind of plays into it. So I pretty much am the safety gremlin, and I chase Dean around and make sure that things are where they're supposed to be and that the, doors are closed and the tools are put away, just because we know what happens. Not that it would happen here, but we turn off the hot wires on the fences and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important for me and Dean, as well as just in general, for kids to understand that, farms have many different faces and that they can come out here and be safe. So I think we're working in the right direction. I do ask for feedback from the vendors, from everybody to just, what do they think? We get a lot of comments about how nice the animals are, how clean they are, but also, mostly Dean. I'm on the technical end. He busts his butt cleaning up everything to make sure when I walk around that I don't see things.
Well, I attended this year, and it was a fantastic event, and weather plays a big part because this is outdoors. So you had an awesome fall day, and so it just the stars aligned for you for sure. From a retail perspective, what fiber products are popular?
It's interesting because I just sent out a little mini survey to the 24 vendors that we had, asking them what they thought. And it does change. Even our customer base changed. So I have 2 years to compare it to, and I'm just going to use my information that I have. And last year's Saturday was a slow day. Sunday was big. This year's Saturday was big. Sunday was slow. And what I have looked at through historically doing many of these fiber shows, festivals, things like that, is usually Sunday is a bigger day. And so this year, with the amazing weather we had, nothing, looking at it scientifically, nothing played out the way it did the year before. So it depends. Like sometimes you have a group of spinners and they want to spin their own yarn. So that's when they would buy the product that's called roving. But others, I have all natural colors. And what I also noticed this year is during the festival, I sold more yarn for sweaters. You can tell, they'll tell you, they'll want help picking out the yarn, things like that. But I went to a 2-day fiber sale in North Dakota the weekend before, and I did not sell one skein of yarn. So you can't project any of this. This is my first big dive into retail. I've done committee sales, things like that. And I guess this is how the world of retail works. I'm not really sure. But I do know the world of fiber, and I know more about animals. So,
hey, now you have to define another term: skein.
Skein, okay. And that is when you're making something. You'll follow a pattern, and the pattern will tell you how many yards you need to create your garment or whatever. And so then here at my yarn store, a skein is 250 yards. So you would buy 5 skeins to make a sweater, 7 skeins, depending on the size of the sweater. You'll be knitting next.
This is a big farm. Are there other opportunities you are pursuing, Dean, for the farm?
I think maybe some of the holiday events may try to expand into those. But I think most of it will still be run around the fiber business.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about agritourism and the impact of group tour, there's still viability with groups to see rural America and to see working farms. Do you see that as viable?
I am tentatively working on a few options right now. Nothing is hardcore. That is something we'd like to do during the week because it is kind of slow. I also am looking at maybe using my wildlife background to do a series of like homeschool classes. And it's a farm, yes, but we also have an abundance of wildlife around here, even my friends, the coyotes. But we do have foxes, turkeys, deer, we have squirrel, things like that. Seeing those up close for the kids, a vast variety of birds. Mm-hmm. We have pheasants, we have turkeys, we have turkey vultures, we have all sorts of stuff out here that I would like to do that. And I have some friends working on homeschool networks for me to kind of plug into that because we do have pretty much a natural classroom out here.
You've made lemonade out of the lemons that were served to you during COVID, unfortunately. Are there some lessons learned or some key takeaways from the pandemic that influence your business and personal decisions moving forward?
I think at the beginning, it was more of, what are we going to do? We have all these animals. We didn't have as many as we do now, but we did have a fair amount of animals. I did have some job offers, but we would have had to move. Neither one of us really wanted to move. I mean, I'm not that far away from retirement. Dean was able to retire, so us as a family are taken care of. So it was just trying to figure out different ways to make the animals earn a living, buy their own feed, things like that. Pretty much that's what we do. Anything that we make with our business goes right back into feeding the animals, fixing things, whatever, vet bills, things like that. I think we both enjoy the social aspect of agritourism, the events. I mean, pretty much I do a couple of knit night activities here at the farm, and they all know Dean.
This is a question for both of you to answer. What's most rewarding about the work you are now doing with sheep and fiber on the farm?
I think we both enjoy kind of, we were in a supervisory role before, and not that we didn't love our previous staff, but it's also different when you have tasks in front of you, and sometimes you miss them, but it's just, we rely on each other. We kind of formulate a plan and we just do it. And sometimes he doesn't. I make him redo it. Sometimes I do it and he rolls his eyes at me. So it's
just like now.
Yeah, pretty much. So I like that. Our area is beautiful. I think you have a sense of pride when you're working on things of your own that, you're making this well for the animals you take care of, but this is your home and this is where you live. And, we get a lot of comments, and I'm going to say that most of why it's so beautiful is because Dean works his butt off here. And it is beautiful, but I think it's nerve-wracking at times, but it's a way of life that I probably wanted when I was 18 years old, but I'm a city kid, and it took me until now to have that life. And so just trying to make it work, and I love it. And I will let Dean answer.
Dean, how about you? What's most rewarding about the work?
Well, I think I grew up on a small family farm, been in ag my whole life, always thought, if you enjoyed what you did, you didn't work.
Right. Good quote.
So you didn't have to go to work every day. And for the most part, that's always been true for me. And I've always enjoyed letting people understand agriculture. As we get farther away from agriculture, it's harder to relate to it. So when we can have events and things like that and, have even adults come out and see what we do, see, how it works, is very rewarding.
I just thought of something that there is, this year, for the first time, we actually had difficulties with a lamb that his mother, through a long story, which I won't go into, but long story short, he ended up in the house because his mother didn't want to feed him. So he grew up in our house with our dogs just for a month. It was quite an adventure. But because of that, he came out during some of our knitting events and ran around the yarn store, peed on the floor, did all sorts of things like that, got in their bags, took their yarn. But these are ladies that are knitters, hardcore knitters, and I have pictures of them picking him up and cuddling him like a baby because that's the closest they've ever been to sheep. And they just, the other day I was looking for a picture and I came across those pictures. And he was a pain in the neck in the house at times, and he only made it a month. But just the connection that animal had with the women that are all been knitting for decades, and all of a sudden had this moment with a lamb that just is, one of them told me that was probably one of her high life experiences, was he fell asleep in her arms sitting in a chair here in the yarn store. And so when you hear those kind of things, it just kind of connects the dots from the sheep out in the pasture to the yarn on the shelf, and then the connection with people that provide long-time impacts on them, and just giving agritourism, agriculture, and just fiber in general, just kind of a really warm and fuzzy moment.
Well, you both have connected the dots for me on this great farm, the work you're doing with sheep and fiber, and I just want to say congratulations on another successful fiber festival, many more, and I look forward to learning more about your agritourism down the road. So congratulations, and thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for tuning in to the Growing Destinations podcast, and don't forget to subscribe. This podcast is brought to you by Experience Rochester. Find out more about Rochester, Minnesota, and its growing arts and culture scene, its international culinary flavors, and award-winning craft beer by visiting experiencerochestermn.com.